This is Near-DeathTV. I'm your host, Laura Ketchledge. I'm also an author. In 1979, I became a near-death experiencer. I chose to explain the truth I learned about the afterlife, reincarnation, and near-death experience through my fictional book series, The Near-Death Saga. While dead, I was shown all human beings are shrouded in ignorance by design, in order to learn valuable lessons in each incarnation. When you die, the artificial facade falls away, and we awaken from the dream into reality. For more information, you can find us at neardeathtv.com. Please join us as we explore the after effects of near-death experience. Hello, and welcome to Near-Death TV. I'm your host, Laura Ketchledge. I'm a near-death experiencer and the author of Near-Death Connection, part of the Near-Death Saga book trilogy. Today, we have a second interview with Peter Panagore. Hi, Peter, are you there?
I am, Laura. Nice to hear your voice again.
And I couldn't say your last name correctly the first time, but we did it the second recording. So how are you this evening?
I'm well, thanks. I'm very well, thank you. I hope you are too.
I'm going to pick up where we left off. In the last interview, you talked about your near-death experience. You died when you were mountain climbing, and then you also had a second near-death experience where you had a heart attack, and you chose to come back for others both times. Peter, my question for you today is, if you had not had loved ones, let's say you've been a single guy with like no family, would have you chosen to return?
No. Nope. I would not have come back because the bliss on the other side is so unimaginably immense compared to here that people have no idea. And when you're there, the comparison is so obvious. Why would you leave? Why would you go back to suffering and pain when you could live in paradise and bliss? So I would not have come back. And I spent 30 years praying to die. So I had two prayers. I had my meditation prayer that I would pray every day, 20 minutes a day, in order to reconnect with the Holy Divine, make my inner eye single. And then my other prayer was, can I die today? Can you take me home today? Is today the day I get to go back?
My gosh, I find that so interesting. When I had my NDE, as I told you, it was 1979. I fought tooth and nail coming back. It wasn't pleasant. It was such a letdown. But then I also felt like I really wanted to live because I had something I was supposed to do. Not quite sure it is. I think that when you come back, it's the small things that seem small here but are big over there. So it's like you're not coming back maybe to cure cancer because you're not a scientist, but you're coming back to make a difference on some level. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, well, yes. And you come back to make a difference in people's lives. I mean, here I am today. I came back for my parents the first time.
Yes.
And here I am today, having spent the day with my dad in the hospital as he's going into rehab. And I made a difference in his life, his whole life. For 40 years, I was here for him. And so his life changed as a result, and everybody around him and around me. And that's true for every near-death experiencer, in little ways and big ways. We're back here, we come with a different perspective, and we impact those people around us who would have not been otherwise impacted had we stayed dead. And so yeah, to go back to your question for a second, I can say from where I sit now, of course I wouldn't want to come back. But, if I was living a different life, I still might have made the choice to come back. I can't really truly say.
Well, I think that sometimes this aspect of the after effects of a near-death experience, it's not discussed enough. So I'm really feel privileged that we're talking today about it. Have you gotten an important message, with your, newfound sensitive or psychic abilities? have you gotten a message for someone else, something outside the box that helped another person?
Oh, countless times, countless times,
Could you share one?
thousands of times.
Just share one that was you found significant, please.
Well, I've since I've come back, I've saved 3 or 4 lives. I mean, so there are people alive today because I was on the scene, and now they're not dead, and the people around them aren't suffering the grief of the deceased. You know, so, but in smaller ways, okay. So I was called to. I was a congregational minister, and someone asked me today, so does Christianity inform your NDE? Nah, it's totally the other way around. My near-death experience erased my Christianity, and it informs my behavior in Christianity. So I'm a near-death experiencer, and that colors everything. And I got called to this guy's bedside, and he was dying of hepatitis C, and he was bleeding out every orifice. And I got in bed with him. The nurses were there. And I got in bed with this guy in the hospital, and I got behind him, and I whispered in his ear as he died, because he was a bit of a pirate. I live in a coastal town where people smuggle for a living, or have in the past. This guy was kind of like that. And he'd done some bad things. And I sat behind him and I whispered in his ear, "You are beloved. You are loved. Trust the light. Turn your heart to the light as you leave, and embrace the love." And he died in my arms peacefully.
And that's the way it should be. That is so important. Peter, I wanted to share with you that, I was the caregiver to 2 dying parents. My mother had stage 4 cancer. My father had a bad heart and Parkinson's. And I cared for them. And I felt like it was a privilege, even though I was exhausted, because this went on, 4 years and 9 months. I couldn't hardly remember before it because it was so intense. But, they passed at home. They passed with me. And my mother took great comfort in me explaining what would happen after she died. My father wasn't, he wasn't, wanting to discuss that, but I think even some of the discussions that we had, it helped ease them. I think there's nothing more terrifying for an elderly person to be friendless and without a family and being institutionalized where they are dying and going through the dying process alone. That's why I feel that hospice and home health care is so important. And if you can keep your loved ones at home, I'm glad I was able to. But it takes a lot out of you after you lose a person. Do you concur with that?
Oh, I sure do. And especially about hospice, because it's sort of like they're midwives into death. Like, the midwife brings the baby into the world, with the hospice worker brings the soul back to life, really.
When you were with this man, you knew he was going to pass, and he hadn't been a saint. I mean, nobody is. He's done some things that were regrettable, but he had your comfort, and was like, you were leading the way.
He borrowed my peace.
Yes, I think that's really important.
Kind of what happened. And he died peacefully, and his whole family they were all in the waiting room. So it wasn't like I was just him and me. It was like there's 20 people in this other waiting room waiting for him. And I went over to visit with the family, and the nurse popped her head and said, "Oh, he's super agitated, Peter. Can you come and hold him?" And because it's a small town, everybody knows everybody. So I go. That's how I ended up in the room, and he died peacefully. And that's the most that you could want.
And that is, a very, very meaningful and generous thing that you did. Now let's switch gears here a little bit. Now, have you found some humor at all? I mean, I've had some funny things or experiences. I take some humor and all this. I don't take myself all that seriously. But, don't you find it that humor is so healing? And when you have had a near-death experience, that you can embrace some of these emotions that we have much more easily?
Oh, I think humor is the key. Humor is, first of all, you can say things when you're funny, being funny that you can't say otherwise.
Yeah.
And I'm a pretty irreverent person, and I think that it's funny to talk about God and be irreverent at the same time.
Yeah, I think you've got to have some humility and some humor in this. And
Yeah.
sometimes I've heard some NDEers talk, and they're just so serious, and I feel like saying, "Hey, lighten up! Let somebody tell a joke," you know?
Yes. Well, I'm a very serious person, but I'm also very serious about humor. I wish I'm not a joke teller. I can't like tell you a joke, but I really like being funny. I really like making people laugh because life is hard enough. You may as well have fun in the meantime. Really.
So, with your near-death experience, what path do you think you would have been on in your life? And be honest with me, if you had never had the near-death experience and its after effects, where do you think the road of life would have taken you if you'd never gotten on that mountain, if you'd never had a heart attack?
I would be an architect. That'd be the first thing. My profession would be very different. I was aiming toward architecture. My family's business is architecture. I had a pencil in my fingertips since I was a kid. So first of all, I'd be in an entirely different career. I wouldn't have married the woman I married. I would have been well, I took the Minnesota multiphasic personality indicator test, and there's a battery of 3-day tests. And the guy said to me at the end, he said, "Good thing you have a conscience because people with your personality type tend to get in trouble."
Well, I can believe
So,
that. I can understand that. So, I mean, I don't think you would have gone to a life of crime, but you wouldn't have had
no,
the life that you've had now.
no, I wouldn't have been a life of crime, but I probably would have flirted with the edges of illegality. Just been my personality.
Both toes
Um,
on the foul line, I take it.
Pardon, say that again?
You would have had both toes on the foul line.
I would have had both toes on the foul line and leaning my nose over, but my body wouldn't have crossed. That's right.
Now, what kind of advice? There's a lot of people listening to this. They've never had an out-of-body experience and near-death experience. What advice could you give to them? And just kind of put it in a small nutshell, if possible. What kind of advice could you share with them about the near-death experience?
Love is the most important thing there is. Even if you never have a near-death experience or an out-of-body experience, love is the most important thing there is. It is the treasure of life and the treasure of heaven. It's what you give away that you get to keep, and what's given to you, you get to keep. And so love as liberally and as freely as you can because it's an inexhaustible supply available to every single human being. And if you want to have, oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say, if you're interested in having some kind of mystical experience, develop yourself a meditative prayer life, and don't quit.
Yes, I totally agree. I use Hemisync tapes from the Monroe Institute, and they've helped me just a tremendous tremendous amount. I want to share with you something that I think you could really identify with. As you know, I have autoimmune disease, and I've spent the last 30 years in and out of the hospital. I would say a professional patient. This is about, I don't know, 20 some years ago. I went to a clinic and I was getting gamma immune gamma globulin transfusion, and it hurts. And this very nice man sat next to me, and he was in bad shape. You could tell, his teeth had fallen out. He couldn't have been 40. He was very, very close to death and sweet. And we were talking to him, and he says, "You're not afraid to sit next to me?" And I said, "Why would I?" And he said, "Well, I've got end stage AIDS." And I said, "Well, I don't have cooties, so I think we're well suited." And we were kind of laughing. And, we were sitting there a couple of hours. You talk when you have a transfusion. And I put my arm around him towards the end, and I just said, "I'm going to pray for you." And I saw tears in his eyes because I don't think he'd gotten too many hugs, especially from a stranger that's a blabbermouth and was telling jokes. And I just felt like, his courage to talk about it, to be who he was, and to tell me about it was outstanding. And what a nice man he was. I felt a lot of love was exchanged between us. And is that because I've had a near-death experience and this man was in the dying process? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, you were available to him because you had a near-death experience, I think. And that was, if I'm getting the timeline right, that was when it was like he would have had leprosy for a lot of people. They would not have touched him because he had AIDS. And so, but you could see beyond that to the human soul inside him, and you were present to him because he wasn't his disease.
I
He
thought he was
was a
beautiful,
human being. He's a
a beautiful
beautiful,
person. I found him to be not
right.
cosmetically, but a beautiful person.
Oh yeah. So the light inside people shines through often when they're in suffering. And it doesn't always, but often it does.
Well, every once in a while, I'll meet somebody. I get this like, I don't know, a blast of emotion,
Hmm.
of goodness, or just I feel love or compassion for them. It's like very, very random and strange, and never happened at Walmart.
Well, the soul of love when you meet it.
Yes, yes. I think, some of the after effects are what I found are extremely random. And, if there's a message, for me, it usually comes in sideways. I'm no great psychic. I cannot pick the lotto numbers, and I'm not psychic enough to uh, to figure out what I should do for the next journey of my life. But I think with a near-death experience, it gives you kind of a foundation, because you no longer just have the belief. There's a truth and a knowing, and you feel like we're in a dream. I feel like I'm in a dream now, and when you die, you awaken from the dream into reality. Do you
Oh
agree?
yeah. Oh yeah. That's my daily existence.
Can
Exactly so.
you tell us what you put? You talked about the book. Is it Knowing?
Uh,
What is
uh,
your book?
well, but the one that I'm writing now,
No, the last book that we.
the near-death experience book on Heaven is Beautiful, and I was talking about the difference between belief and knowing. Is that what you
Yes,
mean?
yes, yes.
So before I died, I believed. I believed in the afterlife. I believed in God. But after I died, all of that was gone. All like my capacity to believe or doubt were erased from me. There was no if I were a motherboard and I had chips in my motherboard, the chip of belief and faith and doubt, they were not only pulled out of the motherboard, there were no holes for them to be received anymore. It was completely gone, and I was left with knowing that I'm known by the knower of all. I know that God, and I use the word God because that's a convenient word for me. It's all metaphor for me. So I know that God is real. I know that that's the only real
Creator.
there
Yeah.
is.
Where can people, please tell us the name of your book and your website, and where people can purchase your book, please.
It's Heaven is Beautiful, How Dying Taught Me That Death is Just the Beginning. Easy to remember, Heaven is Beautiful. My website is peterpanagore.love, and the book is published by 4 or 5 different publishers and available in 9 editions globally. You can get it at Amazon and lots of other places too.
Oh, that's
And
wonderful. I think that's going to be a great read. I hope you're listening out there, the general public, because this is a must-read book. The comfort that you got after your near-death experience seems to be the foundation of your enhanced personality. Am I correct?
yes, it's the foundation of absolutely everything in my life.
It's amazing how that one quote tragic event on a mountain, you got a lot of mileage out of it there, Peter.
Well, I didn't. I asked to come back,
Yeah.
and the when I was about to come back, the divine, the holy, the source was saying to me telepathically without language, come home, stay here." And I said, "Well, can I go? If I go back there, can I come back to heaven?" And the voice said, "Yes, you can come back here." I said, "I choose to live my life." And the voice said, "You won't live your life," and send me back. And so from the very moment of my arrival, that's not quite true. Once my brain was back online and functional again, from that point on, I was compelled to do what I do. I was an entirely new person with a new mission and a new raison d'etre, reason for being. And I've been in pursuit of it ever since that day, 40 years, every day, all day.
And your new book is
It's
titled.
It's titled Modern Mysticism and You, subtitled Why You Don't Need a Near-Death Experience to Have a Divine Experience of the Holy. And
When
I,
is that going to be released?
oh, probably next year. I've still got a couple chapters to finish, and I've got another project I'm trying to complete at the same time, but it should be out next year, maybe by Christmas, a year from now.
I think you're the original multitasker.
Well, I get opportunities that I don't want to say no to, and so I try to make them juggle as many balls as possible. But also part of it is, as a before I was an ice climber, I was a backpack and mountaineer rock climber, and one of the things about climbing is you always think of a way out of the situation you're in. So you've got a move to make, and you got to make this move, but you think, what's the alternative? How can I, if this doesn't work, what's my next move? And so I'm always got two routes in my mind. I've always got these two things. I'm gonna work on with my left hand, and I'm gonna work with my right hand, and we're gonna see which one makes fruit, which one comes to fruition.
I think that's a beautiful way to live your life. I think that each of us, we have a path, but we can change it and improve our, situation. One of the, I think, things letting go of the fear of death is very, very freeing. Do you agree?
Yeah, I didn't let go of the fear of death. It let go of me. I have zero fear of death. I'm sure it's true for you. Is it?
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty much gone. I always felt, like I have to finish things. One of the reasons I really, after losing my sister, and there's nothing that more
Mm,
sobering than when you're the
yeah.
surviving child with to take care of, your adult parents. I didn't, have the luxury of letting go and not trying, fighting my disease. I had to stay alive, and because I really wanted to care for my parents, I didn't want them to be alone.
Yeah,
The last year.
selflessness.
I don't
That's so,
know. I'm not exactly
yeah.
St. Janice Laura Kethledge, but
Yeah,
I
but
think
that
I've got a
doesn't,
pretty good heart.
it's still selflessness.
Can I share something that was unique that happened? Would you like to hear my little life
Sure,
story
I would love to
and get
hear
your
it.
spin on it? Because I think it was either 2009 or 10. I went in for surgery. Everything went well, but I was, very, very worn out and had pneumonia afterwards, which, I'm prone to. So I'm sitting in my bedroom. I'm alone. I live alone. I have a horse farm. And my late sister came to me. Now, it was this a lucid dream, was this a message?
Mm,
It felt very, very real. I was in that twilight of half asleep, half not, but not
mm-hmm,
on pain medications. So she
mm-hmm.
came to me and we got up and we started walking towards the gate. And she looked at me and she said, um, I'm going to the hospital now. Will you join me? And I couldn't open the gate and join her because I still had, horses and dogs, and what would happen to that? My horse was the most precious thing on earth to me for, till he passed. He was alive then, and I just couldn't leave him. And then she left, and then an ambulance came, and a man got out and said, Laura, are you ready to go? Let's go. It's time for you to go. And I just thought, I can't. And I had this like whooshing feeling, like this swooshing feeling, like this pressure in my chest. And I was sitting in my bed and I kept thinking, did I hallucinate? Was this an out of body experience? Was this a message or what? I think that I was very dicey. It was a very dicey time with the pneumonia because it can creep up on you. So I ran in and took a bunch of antibiotics and went to the doctor about more antibiotics. But I feel like that was like an invitation if I wanted to go or not. What do you think? What's your spin on that experience?
A couple different things. One, yes, I think it was an invitation to go, and maybe if you had gone, you would have been found dead in your bed.
Mm.
But you didn't go, or maybe you couldn't. The door wouldn't open. But also, the most common, it seems to me through my research, that the most common mystical experience there is the visitation of a deceased loved one. And that from my informal surveying of large groups, 50% of the crowd have had someone dead come to them, and in either the place where you're talking about, in that between awake and sleep place, or in a dream, or even absolutely awake in their kitchen, uh, the person they love who has died recently pops into their world and communicates directly to them, and
Yeah.
it leaves them with a shift in their belief system, because maybe they believed in the afterlife before, but
Mhm.
now they know that that one person is not dead. And so that's a major noetic shift of wisdom and understanding. They may not know that anybody else gets to go to the afterlife, but they know that their beloved one is not really truly gone.
Well, Peter, my vision was better. I saw better. And everything was more intense, and it was about as real as could be.
Oh, it's
You know, the
real.
thing about my sister, she was just my best friend, my biggest cheerleader. My mom, she was like the best person you'd ever meet. And she died 25 years ago. She looked young. It was almost a shock to see her looking, I don't know, maybe like 22 ish, just absolutely gorgeous and young. And, she really wanted me to come and gave me the author, but she gave me the choice. And I thought the experience, whatever it was, whatever it meant, was meaningful and absolutely an extension of true, real love.
Yeah, I think that the dead aren't really gone, and that they can come back and talk to people. And from what I've read, and this is outside my experience, so it's from what I've read, that people come back when they visit you, uh, when they think they're at their best self. So that's the skin they put on. That's the appearance that they take. And maybe they think their best self was when they were 85 years old and they were the totally top of their game. Or maybe it's when they're 22 and most athletic and beautiful.
Has,
Um,
have you had a visitation since your near death experiences of a loved one or a friend coming to see you? Have you had any type of contact with what we call a ghost?
I have had contact with ghosts, but not with someone I love.
Now,
So
you haven't had some with someone you love, but could you share one of the most vivid or dramatic experience, just one of them with a ghost encounter?
sure. The most dramatic is that I'm a stilt walker in parades locally, just for fun. And I was late to a parade that I'd not done before, and I wasn't sure where it began. So I grabbed my iPad and sitting in my car with my stilts, and I look up the parade name. And the first article that it comes to isn't where the parade begins. It's what happened 2 years before, when a Shriner, those little guys with those fez caps on, and the little
Yeah.
go-karts. Well, he's in a Shriners group, and this particular parade was between two towns that were really close. The downtowns are next to each other, and there's a short, narrow bridge under which a salt river runs. And on that bridge, he hit the ramp wrong and flipped his cart, and he died in front of everyone. His head hit the ground, and
He
he
was he was
died.
he was taken away.
Yep.
So,
And so
wow.
I read this article. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's terrible. Where's the parade begin? I find out where the parade begins. I get there. I get there on time. I get in my slot. It's a pumpkin fest parade, and I'm dressed as a corn stalk and a pumpkin, and I'm having a great time with the kids running through my legs, and I'm jumping up and down, and I'm dancing, and I get to the bridge, and I'm halfway across the bridge, and I look over to my left, and seated on the sidewalk are two of my neighbors. And so I was moving, I was trucking right along, and so I put down my left stilt and I did this power spin, one stilt spin with my arms and legs out, and I took this large step toward them. And as I stepped toward them, my right stilt bolt, there's a bolt that holds that my shoe attaches to, uh, broke, and I had all this forward momentum. And as it broke, I popped out of my body, and behind my body, I saw like a gray fog, but it was the size of a very large human being, but not shaped like a human being, sort of football shaped.
A soul Do you feel like
Yes,
it was a
it
soul?
was it was a soul, and I was outside myself and inside myself at the same time, and I saw through my own eyes and also my outside body eye that I was going over, and I inside my body, I felt myself go over the railing, and I aimed with my stilts on into this raging river, and and I but I had designed my stilts so that if the stilt broke, it would bring me right to the ground. And so even though I felt myself headed toward the toward the river, my momentum changed direction and I went down to the ground. And meanwhile, as I hit the ground, two guys I know ran to the side of the bridge where I was, and he was on the railing ready to go in right after me. And the other guy, my other buddy, was on the other side of the bridge. He was going in the river on the other side, and everybody's jumping up and down and screaming, ah! And I land on the ground.
Goodness.
And so I twisted my ankle a little bit, but it was better than drowning. And I picked my stilts up. I said, I'm okay, everybody. And I had made a mistake. It was totally my fault. I should have used a higher gauge bolt. I couldn't get one at the hardware store that day. I figured, I'll use the next gauge down today. It won't really matter. Well, it did. And I've been still walking for 30 years. I know what I'm supposed to do, and I broke my own rule. And so I'm sitting in my buddy's car, this guy who was going to go in the river after me, and my phone rings. And it's this woman a near-death experiencer, who I'd been counseling, she'd been suicidal, because people get suicidal from near-death experience.
I can understand that.
Right. And so I did. I counseled her for about a year, but she sees dead people. She's a paramedic, and she sees dead people all the time. And she said, "So Peter, what happened?" I hadn't talked to her in 6 months. "Peter, what happened?" I said, "Denise, what are you talking about?" Playing coy, like, not going to give it away. And she said, "Suddenly I'm sitting here in my kitchen, and this guy, doesn't call it a ghost, this guy appears to me, and he says he's sorry, that he didn't mean it. He just thought that you could see him, and he wasn't trying to hurt you." And
oh my gosh. So this soul, this non-living individual was there to help you, and someone across the country picked up on it and got a message. So I think that's pretty dramatic, because Peter pretty much saved your life, or it could have been catastrophic injuries. People can drown when they go underwater and they have the wind knocked out of them during a fall.
Oh, I would have drowned, because my stilts weigh about 25 pounds.
Oh yeah.
I would have drowned for sure. Which, and as I thought to myself, okay, this is dramatic. This is dramatic death. It's gonna make the papers, because guy drowns on stilts in parade.
Wow. Yeah, that's kind of an embarrassing way to go, I have to say.
Yes, it is. It is.
You're gonna pick them. It's not like you ran into a burning building to save kittens and died.
No.
Man drowns from his own stilts. I'm sorry, I'm laughing right now.
It's funny. It's funny. It's funny.
But I guess it was a lesson. You never try to jerry-rig your
no. That's right. That's right.
So with that being said, you've been touched. You have some psychic abilities, I feel, that are very, very strong. You've incorporated them into your everyday living and having a soulful purpose. But have you met other NDEers you think that really are having trouble with after their NDE, that they are not handling it well? We don't want to say anybody's particular names, but
I won't know. But I think
it's very hard, very, very hard to cope with.
Oh, it's hard to cope with.
Yeah.
And I end up I do counseling for near-death experiencers, because it's hard to cope with. And I coped with it by myself for 20 years, because there was no one to turn to. Who even knew of such a thing? Yeah. But yeah, it's hard to readjust. And from what I read, it takes a decade to really reintegrate here, because it's the after effects. We're talking about the spectacular after effects, but there are daily after effects of feeling disassociated, feeling that you're not anchored in time and space, feeling that no one understands you anymore, that you look the same as you did before, but you're a completely different person, and everyone around you treats you like you were the same person, but you're not anymore. And you can't talk about it because there are no words to describe it. And so when people say what happened to you, it's really tough to talk about. And oh, yeah, it's a very difficult thing. And people say to me, "Oh, I wish I had a near-death experience." And from where I sit, no, you don't. You think you do, but the trouble that it brings is equal to the blessings that it brings. I considered it most of my life a blessing and a curse, because it set me outside the world, which makes it difficult to participate in daily living, jobs, works, relationships, moms and dads and wives and husbands and boyfriends and girlfriends and kids, and all of it's more difficult because I have a very different perspective than they do. I
No.
see the world completely differently than they do.
I've always felt like I have one foot over into non-physical reality. That's the way I.
Oh yeah, me too. Same thing.
If you know, you're a person that has a strong sense of self, and I'm an egocentric person that thinks she has a strong sense of self. Probably do. It still was a big grapple. It took me. I had my accident at 19. I didn't truly come to terms with it until I was about 26, and I went to a counselor and finally just had to say what had happened. And she was open-minded, and she'd heard this before, and she said, well, read Robert Monroe's books, you'll get a better understanding. And when I did, I just felt, oh man, where were these 7 years ago when I needed them? So I think it's important that people like you, Peter, you share your experiences and to talk and to network with other near-death experiencers so we can take this veil of social isolation away. Do you agree?
Oh, completely. That's exactly why I wrote that book. I wrote the second book, not just to help people to give hope to non-near-death experiencers, but to encourage near-death experiencers to communicate to each other. And that if it took courage to step out and tell the truth, because I'm risking my reputation as a professional, which means my income. And I'm encouraging all near-death experiencers to find the courage to step out and talk about it, because the more that we talk about it, the more readily we are able to readjust to the world, but the more we become a power base. We become a network.
Yes, a network of like-minded people, and that I think it's very, very important.
Yes, it is, because this is the first time in the history of the world that this has happened. This is a new thing. Science is raising the dead by the tens of millions globally, and we're coming back with a message, and so many of us are afraid to talk about it. But imagine if we all spoke together. Imagine if we bring forth the truth of love. What kind of social impact we can have.
That is just so very important. My isolation was profound. I only talked to 4 people about it in a 30-year period. So that's stuffing your emotions. And once I kind of came clean with it and, did some reality TV shows and some interviews and things, I didn't fear anymore about being labeled a wackadoo.
Right,
So,
me too.
yeah, I mean, and you know what? If they don't like it, if they think I'm crazy or it just doesn't appeal to them, it's not my problem.
Right, and they're going to find out for themselves on the day they die.
I told my father before he passed, because he didn't want to talk about it. I've shared that with you. And I said, well, in 20 years, when I go, I can't wait to tell you I told you so. And he laughed. He thought that was funny. But you have to, it's hard to explain the unexplainable, and it really, really is. I mean, I struggle. I could not convey what it felt like to go to source and be wrapped in love and float and be a point of consciousness without any body, and to this beautiful, soft, loving, almost cloud-like experience. And I wasn't there for very long, but there was a sun without being a sun. It was bright and it was beautiful, and being wrapped in love and going back to source. It's a game changer, especially when you come back. And Sometimes do you feel a disappointment in physical reality, our daily lives?
Yeah, so you speak, by the way, you speak for me. What you just said, you speak for me. And yes, disappointment in daily life, it's so less than here. Even the greatest moment of my life, it's, and been some pretty great moments in my life that involve mostly my family, but even that is less than the divine, less than the source.
Well, the wonderful, comforting thing is, we're alive right now. I feel like, you're in physical reality. We're alive. You've got the near-death experiences, knowing that there is more than physical reality. I think it's up to everyone who is an experiencer to live life to the fullest. Be generous when you can. Get a good laugh and have a nice glass of wine and kind of go with the flow.
Yes, you said I must be the original multitasker, but that's exactly why. Is because I'm trying to live my life to the fullest every moment that I can, because it's time limited, and it can be fun. I mean, you may as well have fun while you're here and live.
Yeah, and have a good giggle while you can.
Yeah, right.
So we know that you've got this wonderful book coming up, and when it's released next year, I'd love to have you back as a guest. I've so enjoyed our conversation in part 1 episode and part 2. I'm going to let you go, and would you like to say something, some advice you could give before we end the show? What is your advice to someone else who has been near-death experiencer?
Be kind to yourself. Get a meditation practice in order to polish your inner lens, because the only way out of here is by going in. And find people like yourselves, join groups, find your tribe, talk to each other. You're not crazy, you're not a wackadoodle, you're sane, you have sanity, you have wisdom. um, be available to it. Oh, and understand that not one of us has the fullness of truth.
Yes, I think that's very well said. We've had a glimpse into non-physical reality. We haven't gotten to see the full picture. It'll be an exciting journey, one that we all have a final destination to. Well, listen, I'm going to end the show. Thank you so much. Can you give your website again?
PeterPanagore.love.
Fantastic. Well, that's the end of this segment, and thank you so much. And that's the end of this episode for Near Death TV.